My dearest friends, pull up a chair. Pour yourself a generous glass of something robust, a full-bodied Merlot, perhaps, or a proper cup of Earl Grey if that's more your speed. Settle in, I need to talk, and I need you to listen. Really listen with the kind of patience we've all learned to have after 40-odd years of navigating this bewildering world. This isn't a story for the young, it's too full of the quiet, creeping anxieties and the unglamorous, grinding sadness that only come with a certain number of candles on the birthday cake, a certain amount of life lived in the trenches of marriage and domesticity. My name is Eleanor, but my husband, David, has called me Ellie for as long as I can remember. I'm 52. I am, by any honest measure, a chubby woman. I've come to accept that word, to even own it a little. Not curvy, which sounds like a marketing term for a plus-size clothing line, and not full-figured, which feels like a euphemism whispered in a doctor's office. Chubby, it's the word my mother used, a word I've heard whispered in the schoolyard, a word I've seen reflected in the unforgiving three-way mirrors of department store changing rooms for decades. It's a word that has defined a significant part of my existence, my relationship with myself, and as it turns out, my relationship with my husband. My body is a landscape of soft hills and gentle valleys, a map of years lived, of 2 children born, of Sunday roasts and celebratory cakes and the cozy, quiet comfort of a life built on shared meals and shared silences. My thighs are substantial, my stomach is a soft, rounded curve that I've learned to discreetly hold in when I stand, and my arms, which David used to say were perfect for hugging, are what I call generous. I'm not a woman who turns heads on the street, not in the way a young, slender woman in a summer dress might, but for 32 years I was the woman who turned my husband's head. I was his. That's what makes the last 8 months so utterly, soul-crushingly devastating. It's not just the absence of sex, it's the absence of that specific, electric look in his eyes that used to say, without words, I see you, I want you, you are mine. It's the absence of a casual hand on the small of my back as I wash the dishes, a playful pat on the rear as I bend to pick up the morning paper, a warm, sleepy pull towards him in the middle of the night. It's the silence in the bedroom that's louder than any argument we've ever had. 8 months, 244 days. It might as well be a geological era in the life of a marriage. The last time we were intimate was a fumbling, silent affair in early October, just after our youngest, Emily, had left for university. I remember thinking, with a mix of relief and a pang of sadness, that we were finally alone, that we could rediscover each other. The house felt empty, echoing with the absence of children, but I saw it as a new blank canvas for us. I bought new sheets, a lovely deep burgundy. I even bought a new nightgown, a silk one, not gaudy, just elegant. I thought we were about to enter a new, exciting chapter. The chapter of us. That night, it was as if he was going through the motions. It was perfunctory, almost mechanical, and over before I could really feel anything but a hollow emptiness. He fell asleep immediately, turning his back to me, and I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, the new silk of the nightgown feeling cold and clammy against my skin. The silence that followed was broken only by his gentle, rhythmic breathing, a sound that had once been a lullaby and now felt like a wall being built. In the months that followed, the distance grew. Not a sudden chasm, but a slow, imperceptible erosion of everyday intimacies. The goodnight kisses became a perfunctory peck on the cheek. The morning greetings became a distracted mourning. Ellie, as he scanned the headlines on his phone over his coffee. He stopped leaving the little notes he used to tuck into my lunch. He stopped complimenting my cooking, something he'd always done, even if the meal was just spaghetti hoops on toast. He started coming home later and later. He'd go straight to his study, the door clicking shut behind him, a sound that became the daily punctuation mark of our growing estrangement. The man I'd shared my life with for over 3 decades had become a ghost in his own home, haunting the periphery of my existence. You see, when you're a woman of a certain age, and a chubby one at that, the first conclusion you jump to is the most predictable, the most cliched, and the most devastating. He's found someone younger, someone prettier, someone thinner, someone easier. You don't just think it, you live it. It burrows into your subconscious and whispers its venomous little suggestions while you're trying to fall asleep. You scrutinize yourself in the mirror, searching for every new wrinkle, every grey hair that seems to appear overnight, every dimple of cellulite on your thighs. You become a detective in your own life, looking for clues, for evidence of your own perceived inadequacy. The narrative is so deeply ingrained in our culture, in our fears, that it feels inevitable. The husband hits his 50s or 60s, has a midlife crisis, and trades in his comfortable, familiar wife for a newer, sportier model. It's a story as old as time, and I was convinced it was my story now. And then, in November, the perfect villain for my internal drama arrived. Her name is Chloe Worthington. Even her name sounds like it belongs to someone from a glossy magazine. She's 26, fresh out of a prestigious MBA program, with a smile that's always camera-ready and a laugh that tinkles like crystal chimes, not the deep, guttural laugh I have. She started working at David's architectural firm as a junior project manager. His company, David Harrison Associates, had been his pride and joy for over 25 years. He built it from a one-man operation in a tiny office above a dry cleaner's to a respected mid-sized firm known for its clever, sustainable designs. I'd been to a few company events over the years, but I'd never felt the need to be a fixture at his office. I'd always trusted him completely. But 8 months of emotional starvation changes a person. It turns a trusting wife into a wary, suspicious stranger. When he started mentioning Chloe's name, it was with a forced, professional neutrality that immediately set my teeth on edge. Chloe has some interesting ideas about the new sustainable materials. Chloe's been putting in some long hours on the Henderson project. Chloe suggested a new software for project management. Suddenly, every neutral comment he made was a coded message. Every mention of her name was a knife twisting in my gut. I started to see her as this malevolent, siren-like figure, a succubus sent to steal my husband's attention and his affection away from me. In my mind, she wasn't just a new employee. She was the living, breathing embodiment of my replacement. I began my investigation. My methods were pathetic, the desperate acts of a woman clinging to the wreckage of her marriage. I'd find excuses to call him at the office, just to see if she answered. I'd ask about his day, listening for any hesitation in his voice. I tried to decipher his text messages, but he was always so careful. I'd look at the company's website, scrutinizing her photo. She was in one of the group pictures, a radiant blonde in a crisp, white blouse, and I felt a surge of pure, ugly hatred for her. It was so unlike me. I'm a gentle person, I really am. But this feeling was corrosive. It was eating me alive from the inside. I started going through his jacket pockets, a habit I'd never had before. I felt so cheap, so tawdry. I'd pick up his phone and pretend to be looking for my own, just to get a glimpse of his screen. Was there a text from a CW? A missed call from a number I didn't recognize? My heart would thump a frantic rhythm against my ribs every time I saw him tapping away on his phone, a secretive smile on his face. I'd think, he's smiling at her. He's telling her things he no longer tells me. The loneliness was a physical weight. The house, which had once felt like a sanctuary, became a prison. I'd wander around the rooms, touching the familiar objects. The worn armchair where he used to read the paper on Sunday mornings. The framed photograph of us on our 25th wedding anniversary. A picture I'd always loved because we looked so happy, so comfortable. Now I hated it. I saw to strangers who had been posing for a lie. I'd stare at the garden I'd carefully cultivated, seeing only the weeds I hadn't pulled, the deadheading I'd neglected. My life was unraveling, and I was certain it was because I wasn't enough. I started to sleep on the far edge of the bed, as if creating a demilitarized zone between us. It was a form of self-protection, a way of preemptively rejecting him before he could reject me. I'd listen to him breathe in the dark, feeling a million miles away. I'd remember how he used to hold me. His arms were strong from years of carrying drawing boards and, more recently, of nervously pacing in his study. He'd wrap them around me, and I'd feel safe, cherished, desired. I was his squishy Ellie, he'd tease, and he'd kiss my forehead and tell me I was the best decision he'd ever made. Now I just felt like a big, soft mistake. The thought that he might be holding her, kissing her forehead with that same tenderness, was a thought so agonizing. I'd have to physically get up from the bed and go to the bathroom, to splash cold water on my face, just to stop the spiral. My friends, I know some of you might be thinking, Eleanor, why didn't you just talk to him? Why did you let it fester? And you're right. In hindsight, it seems so obvious. But when you're in the middle of it, when your self-esteem is on the floor and every piece of evidence you've constructed seems to point to a devastating conclusion, the thought of having the conversation is the most terrifying thing in the world. Because having the conversation means potentially hearing the truth. And what if the truth was exactly what I feared? What if he looked me in the eye, with a hint of pity, and said, "Yes, Ellie, I've found someone else. I'm sorry, I wasn't strong enough for that. I was a coward, hiding behind my suspicions, feeding them with my own fears." I'd practice the conversation in my head. I'd be calm, rational. I'd say, "David, we need to talk. I feel like something has changed between us. Is there something going on? Is there someone else?" And then I'd picture his face, the shame, the guilt, the confirmation. And I'd panic and decide to wait another day. It was easier to be angry. Anger is a powerful fuel. It gave me energy when all I wanted to do was curl up on the sofa and cry. It was easier to focus my rage on Chloe, this young, perfect, unknown woman, than to face the possibility that it was just that maybe the fire had simply gone out, that maybe he just didn't want me anymore. I'd replay our recent interactions in my head, hunting for more proof. He'd become so quiet, the man who used to regale me with tales of difficult clients and tricky planning. Applications now gave me monosyllabic answers. How was your day? Fine. Any problems? The usual. What did you have for lunch? A sandwich. It was like talking to a recalcitrant teenager. His shoulders were constantly hunched, and he'd developed a nervous habit of running his hand through his hair, which he was definitely losing more of. I, in my paranoid state, interpreted this as the look of a man burdened by a guilty conscience, of someone who was trying to figure out how to extricate himself from one relationship to pursue another. I saw his exhaustion as a result of the energy he was expending on a secret affair. What a fool I was. The breaking point, or the beginning of the end of my crazy conjecture, happened 3 days ago. It was a Thursday. David had come home at his usual new late hour, 8:30 p.m. He'd muttered a hello, shrug off his coat, and trudged up the stairs to his study. I'd made a lovely pork and apple casserole, his favorite, but he'd barely touched it. I was in the kitchen, my hands deep in soapy water, scrubbing the pan with a viciousness that was entirely disproportionate to the task, feeling my anger and hurt build up inside me. I was composing my fuck you speech in my head. You can have your precious Chloe, for all I care. See if she make you your favorite casserole while you ignore her all evening. See if she put up with your grumpy silence while she stays up at night wondering if you still love her. See if she love you through all the boring, ugly, real life bits the way I have for 32 years. I was so lost in my righteous fury that I didn't hear him come down the stairs. The first thing I was aware of was the silence, the absence of the familiar creak on the third step. Then I heard a sharp gasp. I spun around, and the sight of him stopped me cold. He wasn't standing tall. He was leaning against the doorframe of the kitchen, his face an ashen grey, and his body was shaking. I mean, really shaking, as if he had a fever. "David," I cried, dropping the pan with a clatter into the sink and rushing to him, my heart thumping with a sudden, sharp fear that was entirely different from the anxiety that had been gnawing at me. "What is it? Are you ill? What's wrong?" My hands went to his arms. He felt clammy, cold, even through his shirt. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and glassy. "I don't know what to do, Ellie," he whispered, his voice cracking, reedy and small. "I'm so scared." His knees buckled. I'm not a strong woman, but I threw my arms around him, holding him up. I managed to half walk, half drag him to the armchair in the living room. He slumped into it, burying his face in his hands. He was sobbing. David, who rarely cried, who even at his own father's funeral had been a rock of quiet dignity for the rest of the family, was sobbing like a broken child. I dropped to my knees in front of him, my casserole-streaked hands on his knees. "David, tell me. Please, just tell me what's happened. Is it an illness?" All thoughts of Chloe evaporated. This was real. This was terrifying. This was my husband, and he was falling apart. He shook his head, a violent, jerky movement. I can't tell you. I've tried to handle it. I didn't want to burden you. You've been so good, so patient, and I've been a monster." His words, his admission that he felt he'd been a monster, struck me like a physical blow. It was the first time he'd acknowledged there was a problem between us. "David, listen to me," I said, my voice surprisingly firm. "You are my husband. Whatever it is, we face it together. That's what we do. That's what we've always done. Now, you're going to tell me what's going on, or I'm taking you to the hospital right now." He took a deep, shuddering breath. He looked up at me, and for the first time in months, he really looked at me. His eyes were red-rimmed and full of a profound, soul-deep exhaustion. He reached out a trembling hand and touched my cheek. It was the first time he had touched my face with any tenderness in months. "I've lost the company, Ellie." The words didn't compute. "What?" I whispered. "Not lost," he stammered, trying to get the words out. It's drowning. We're on the edge of bankruptcy. I've mortgaged the house, everything, trying to keep it afloat. We've been losing money for 18 months. I kept thinking I could turn it around. I invested in new technology, took on more staff, but the big projects dried up. The Henderson development fell through. The new office block in Birmingham. The client pulled out. We're millions in debt. The bank is calling in our overdraft. I couldn't pay the staff their last salaries. I don't know how I'm going to pay them next week." He was speaking faster and faster, the words tumbling out like a dam had broken. "I've been so scared, Ellie. I've been so terrified of telling you. I've failed you. I've failed the kids. I've spent 30 years building something, and now it's just gone. I stay in my study all night, trying to find a way out. I've been trying to hide it from you. I thought if you didn't know, the fear wouldn't be real. I felt so numb. I lost myself. I couldn't face you. I couldn't let you see what a failure I was." My mind was reeling. All my carefully constructed scenarios of infidelity, of secret lunches with Chloe, of whispered phone calls and illicit passion, disintegrated into dust. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, but it wasn't because of the news. It was because of the sheer, monumental, colossal scale of my stupidity, my selfishness, my vanity, all the energy I'd spent on jealousy, while he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Chloe," I heard myself whisper, Is she helping you? With the company? The question was pathetic, even to my own ears, but I had to ask. I had to know. He looked at me, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. Chloe, yes, she's been a godsend, actually. She's the only one I've told. She's been working like a dog with me, trying to find a way out, trying to renegotiate with the bank, trying to sell off assets. She's the only one who knows the full extent of it. The other staff, they're all in the dark. But they're starting to sense something's wrong. I've been terrified they would leave. It's so humiliating, Ellie, to have the fear of losing my business and the utter shame of it. I hired her to bring in fresh ideas, but all she's brought is the terrible job of helping me wind it all down. He gave a hollow, mirthless laugh. Not much of a career start for her, is it? I felt tears streaming down my face, hot and shameful. It wasn't for the money. It wasn't for the house or the lifestyle. It was for him. For the sleepless nights he'd spent in his study, alone with his terror. For the burden he'd been carrying, feeling that he couldn't share it with the one person who was supposed to be his partner. And it was for me. For my own petty, self-absorbed jealousy. He was losing his life's work. The thing that gave him his identity, his purpose. And all I could think about was my own wounded pride. Oh, David, I sobbed, pulling him to me, holding his head against my soft chest. Oh, my poor, brave, stupid, wonderful man. I thought you were having an affair. I thought you were with Chloe. The confession tumbled out of me, raw and honest. I was so consumed with jealousy. I thought you'd stopped wanting me because I was this. I gestured at my ample body. I thought you'd found someone younger, someone thinner, someone better. He pulled back, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and disbelief. He gripped my shoulders, his fingers digging in. You thought I was having an affair. You thought I was with Chloe. Ellie, I haven't been able to think about anything but this nightmare for over a year. I haven't been able to think about food or sleep or anything. I haven't thought about sex because I've been terrified of my entire world collapsing. Ellie, I felt so completely, utterly worthless. Why would you think I was looking elsewhere? You are the only person in the world I would ever want. His words were a bomb, a relief so profound it made me dizzy. But you stopped. You stopped touching me, I sobbed. You stopped looking at me. You were so distant. I thought I was invisible. He shook his head, looking stricken. Oh, Ellie, no, I know I did. I'm so sorry. I shut you out because I couldn't bear to see the trust in your eyes. I knew I was going to let you down. I was so ashamed. Every time I looked at you, I just saw all the ways I was failing you. I didn't think I deserved you, didn't deserve to be close to you. I was so lost in my own head, trying to find a way out that I didn't see that I was creating a prison for both of us. I was so focused on saving the company financially, I forgot to save us. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. We sat in the armchair, my head on his shoulder, his arms wrapped around me, just holding each other for a long time. The tension, the anger, the fear, it all seemed to drain out of the room. In its place was a new, raw kind of intimacy. The intimacy of shared ruin. The intimacy of brutal, honest confession. He told me everything, every missed payment, every failed negotiation, every sleepless night. He told me the horrible details of how he tried to keep the company alive, borrowing against our future. I listened, my heart breaking for him. I didn't interrupt with questions. I just held his hand and let him finally unburden himself. When he finished, the silence was heavy but no longer hostile. It was just quiet, the quiet of two people who had weathered a storm and were now surveying the wreckage together. I looked at him, my brave, foolish, wonderful husband, and I saw him clearly for the first time in months. Not the failure he saw in the mirror, but the man I loved. The man I'd promised to love in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer. So I said, my voice a little hoarse, "What do we do now?" He sighed, a bone-weary sigh that seemed to come from the very depths of his soul. I don't know, Ellie, the house will have to go. We can file for bankruptcy. I could get a job at a big firm, probably, but it would be a junior position. I'd have to start from the bottom. It's not a future I ever imagined for us. I'm so sorry. David, I said, taking his face in my hands. Listen to me. You are my husband. You are a good, decent, hard-working man. You have done something extraordinary for 30 years. This isn't a failure of character. It's a failure of the market. It happens. We will figure it out. We've got healthy, wonderful children. We've got each other. That's what matters. That's all that has ever mattered. And I meant it. The fear about the money, the future, it was there, a cold knot in my stomach. But it was dwarfed by the immense relief. The relief that my husband hadn't fallen out of love with me. The relief that he hadn't found me lacking. The relief that the problem wasn't me. It was us, facing the world as a team. Just as we'd always promised each other we would. We talked until the small hours of the morning. We made a plan. A frightening, uncertain plan, but a plan nonetheless. We would sell the house. We'd move into a smaller place. We'd scale back our lives. For the first time in months, we were communicating, not just exchanging pleasantries. Around 2 a.m., he took my hand. I'm going to have to let Chloe go, he said quietly. I can't pay her. She's been wonderful, but it's not fair to keep her. I felt a pang of something that used to be jealousy, but now just felt like a distant echo of a bad dream. I nodded. You should bring her here. For lunch, I said. To thank her, properly, before she goes. He looked at me, surprised. Ellie, are you sure? After everything you thought? I'm sure, I said, and I meant it. I'd like to meet her. The real her, not the one I made up in my head. He looked at me, a glimmer of his old smile appearing on his face. You are an extraordinary woman, Ellie Harrison. You know that, right? And then he did something that made my heart sing. He leaned in and kissed me. Not a peck on the cheek. A real kiss, a tender, loving kiss that tasted of tears and relief and a lifetime of shared memories. It was a promise. It was a beginning. Later that night, as we lay in bed, the weight of the last 8 months finally lifting, he pulled me close. Not for sex. It wasn't about that, not then. He just wanted to hold me. He wrapped his arms around me, and I rested my head on his chest. I could feel his heart beating, steady and strong. I could feel my own breath syncing with his. He stroked my hair gently. My squishy Ellie, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. My brilliant, beautiful, squishy Ellie, I am so sorry I wasn't here. I promise you, from now on, I will be. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. I smiled against his chest, a real smile, the first one I'd felt in months. Just promise me one thing, David, I whispered. Anything, he said. Next time you're going to lose a business, just tell me. Don't leave me to figure it out on my own. My imagination is far too active. He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through his chest and into my very soul. It was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. 2 days later, Chloe came to lunch. She was exactly as I'd imagined, and nothing like her at all. She was beautiful, yes, with that easy, youthful glow. She was slender and elegant. But her smile wasn't a weapon. It was genuine and a little nervous. She brought a bottle of expensive wine and a huge bouquet of flowers. She was impeccably polite. But what struck me most was the admiration in her eyes when she talked about David. He's the best mentor I could have ever asked for, she said over my roast chicken. I'm so sorry about the company. I know it's devastating. But I've learned more in the last -1 months working with David than I did in my entire MBA. He's a brilliant architect and a man of incredible integrity. It's just been a perfect storm of bad luck. I watched her as she spoke. There was no sign of romantic attachment. It was purely professional, a deep respect for a boss she clearly adored. I looked at her, this girl who had been the enemy in my head, and I felt nothing but a wave of gratitude and immense, humbling shame. I'd been so wrong about everything. "Thank you, Chloe," I said, reaching across the table to pat her hand. "For everything you've done for David. He's told me you've been his rock. We can never thank you enough." Her eyes welled up with tears. "Thank you, Mrs. Harrison," she said, her voice thick. "That means so much." After she left, David and I stood on the porch, watching her drive away. He put his arm around my shoulder, pulling me close. "She's a nice girl, isn't she?" he said. "She is," I agreed, leaning into him. "And a very, very good thing. I'm a fool." "You're not a fool, Ellie," he said, kissing the top of my head. "You're the woman I love. And from now on, I'm going to prove it. Every single day. And you know, my friends, he's kept his word." The weeks that followed have been a whirlwind of chaos and stress. We've met with accountants, lawyers, and estate agents. We've packed up our beautiful home, a house that held 30 years of memories. But every night, he holds me. Every morning, he kisses me goodbye. The sex hasn't returned yet. Not with the desperation of those early years. But it's not about the sex right now. The intimacy is back. The tenderness. The quiet moments of connection. The simple feeling of being wanted, of being loved. He's found a job. A senior position at a larger firm that actually respects his experience. It's not the same as being his own boss, but he's relieved to have a steady salary. We've found a lovely little flat. It's so much smaller. We can practically hear each other breathe in every room. But it's ours. We're learning to live a simpler life, a more honest life. The other night, we were unpacking a box of kitchen things, and I found the old, chipped mixing bowl my grandmother gave me. I started to laugh. "What is it?" David asked. "Remember the first time you ever came to my flat?" I said. "It was so tiny, and I was so nervous. I made you a cake in this bowl. It was a disaster. It was so dry you could have used it as a doorstop. But you ate it anyway, all of it. And you said it was the best cake you'd ever eaten." He laughed, a full, warm laugh. "God, that was terrible. It tasted of sawdust and desperation. But I knew right then and there that I was going to marry you. It wasn't the cake. It was the look on your face. You were so proud of that lump of sawdust." We both laughed, and I felt a lump in my throat. We were in this tiny flat, our lives completely turned upside down. But we were laughing, together. The lesson, I think, is this for my whole life. I had been conditioned to believe that my value as a woman was tied to my youth, my figure, my desirability as a sexual object. I spent 8 months in a silent prison, of my own making, because I was terrified that my husband's changing behavior was a reflection of my diminishing worth. I saw my soft, round body as the problem. I saw my age as a liability. I saw any younger, prettier woman as a threat. But it was never about that. It was never about my thighs or my wrinkles or my grey hair. It was about his own private battle with despair, a battle he felt he couldn't share because he was trying to be strong, trying to protect me. And it was about my own insecurity, my own belief that my worth was so fragile, so conditional, that it could be snatched away by a pretty face. Marriage after 40, after 50, after 32 years of it, is not the stuff of rom-coms. It's not about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It's about the quiet, unglamorous stuff. It's about holding your husband while he weeps because he's lost everything he's worked for. It's about sitting in a tiny flat, surrounded by packing boxes, and finding a silly old mixing bowl that makes you both laugh until you cry. It's about looking at each other across a kitchen table, with your hair unwashed and your face bare, and seeing the person you've chosen, and knowing, deep in your bones, that you'd choose them all over again. The other night, for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, it happened. It wasn't a night of frantic, passionate lovemaking like we were young again. It was slow, awkward, and tentative at first. We were both nervous. I was self-conscious about my body, which I hadn't let him see properly in months. He was worried about disappointing me, about his own performance. But we just held each other, and then we kissed. And then we let ourselves be real with each other. It was quiet and a little clumsy, and we both cried a little bit. But it was us. It was a start. The best part wasn't the physical release, although that was a wonderful relief. The best part was afterwards, when we were lying in the tangle of sheets, his arm under my head, my hand on his chest. He was tracing patterns on my belly, the soft, squishy part that I hate the most. I missed you, he whispered. I missed this. I missed you. I turned my head and kissed his shoulder. I missed you, too, I said. I thought I'd lost you. You could never lose me, Ellie, he said. You're my home. You always have been. And there, in the quiet darkness, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in months. The future is uncertain, yes. We're starting from scratch at an age when we should be thinking about retirement. But I'm not afraid. I'm with my husband. I'm with my best friend. And I know, in the deepest part of my soul, that this isn't the end of our story. It's just a new chapter. So, to all my dear, darling friends, I share this not as a cautionary tale, but as a reminder. The stories we tell ourselves are often the most dangerous lies. If you feel that distance growing in your own marriage, don't do what I did. Don't turn inward and let your own insecurities build a wall. Talk to him. Fight for him. See the man behind the silence. And most importantly, be kind to yourself. Your chubby thighs didn't break your marriage. Your wrinkles didn't chase him away. The real enemy is the silence. The real villain is the fear, and the only way to conquer it is to reach out and take his hand. To lay your head on his chest and say, I'm here. Tell me everything. Life is too short and too precious to waste it on a ghost. Now, who's for another glass of wine? We've earned it.